Most millennials were told a simple story. Work hard, save consistently, retire comfortably around 65. That story is already broken, not in theory, in math, in timing, in reality. The problem isn't coming someday, it's already here, just quietly. My name is RJ, and today we're here to talk about the retirement timeline that's already broken for millennials, what went wrong, how it happened without anyone announcing it, and why this matters right now, not 30 years from now. Let's start with how retirement was supposed to work, not the motivational version, the actual system. For decades, retirement followed a predictable timeline. You worked roughly 40 to 45 years, your income peaked in your late 40s or 50s, your biggest expenses faded as your house got paid off. Then you stopped working, and your savings carried you for 15 to maybe 20 years. That system depended on three things staying stable: wages, time, and returns. All three moved, just not in your favor. Start with wages. If you were born after the mid-80s, your real wages didn't rise the way your parents did. Not adjusted for inflation, not adjusted for housing, not adjusted for healthcare. Your paycheck number grew, your purchasing power didn't. That alone wouldn't break retirement, it would just make it tighter. The real fracture happened with time. Previous generations entered the workforce earlier, bought homes earlier, started investing earlier. Millennials didn't. Education took longer and cost more. Careers started later. Student debt delayed everything. Every year delayed at the beginning quietly erases multiple years at the end. Because compounding doesn't forgive late starts, it penalizes them. A 25-year-old investing modestly has an almost unfair advantage over a 35-year-old investing aggressively. That's not opinion, that's arithmetic. Now add longevity. Millennials are expected to live longer than their parents. That sounds like progress until you realize retirement was never designed to last 25 or 30 years. The system assumed shorter retirements. It didn't plan for decades of healthcare expenses. It didn't plan for inflation shocks halfway through retirement. So millennials face a contradiction: less time to save, more years to fund. And that's before we talk about how retirement actually works today. Because the system changed, quietly. Pensions disappeared. This was framed as freedom, more choice, more control. In reality, risk was transferred from companies to individuals. You became your own pension fund, without scale, without guarantees, without protection from bad timing. A 401k looks simple, but it's brutally sensitive to sequence. Market drops early in your career are recoverable. Market drops near retirement are not. And millennials are more exposed than they think because retirement projections assume smoothness, steady contributions, stable markets, predictable returns. Real life isn't smooth. Careers pause, families grow, expenses spike, markets do what they want. Now let's talk about the uncomfortable math. Most retirement calculators assume 7 to 8% annual returns after inflation. That assumption comes from historical averages, from decades with very specific advantages: cheap housing, rapid productivity growth, expanding labor markets, lower healthcare costs. Millennials are operating in a different environment: higher baseline costs, slower growth, more volatility. Change expected returns by just 1%, and the savings required jumps dramatically, not by a little, by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then there's housing. Housing used to be retirement's backbone. You paid it off, your biggest expense disappeared. Millennials didn't get that version. They got higher entry prices, longer mortgages, rising taxes and insurance. Even homeowners aren't expense-free in retirement anymore, which makes the traditional retirement age flexible, not aspirationally, functionally. Working longer sounds reasonable on paper until you consider reality. Skills age, health isn't linear, and job markets don't treat older workers gently. The system assumes you can just work until 70. Life doesn't always agree. And here's the irony: millennials are often blamed for not saving enough, but many are saving more aggressively than previous generations did at the same age. They're just doing it in a more expensive world with worse timing. Now zoom out. This isn't only a personal finance issue, it's a structural one. A generation reaching traditional retirement age without enough savings doesn't quietly disappear. It reshapes labor markets, it strains healthcare systems, it changes housing demand, it rewrites policy debates. Retirement stops being a clean exit, it becomes uneven. Some people leave early, others never fully do. Part-time work, consulting, phased exits, not because they failed, but because the system shifted underneath them. Here's the part most people avoid saying out loud. Most millennials won't retire the way their parents did. Not at the same age, not with the same certainty, not with the same margin for error. That doesn't mean collapse, but it does mean adjustment. Which brings us to what actually helps. Not optimism, not denial, adjustment. The first shift is mental. Stop treating retirement as a fixed age. 65 is no longer a destination, it's a variable. What matters now is flexibility, financial flexibility, career flexibility, lifestyle flexibility. That changes how savings are framed. Instead of asking, "Am I on track to retire at 65?" ask, "How many future years of freedom am I buying?" Every dollar invested isn't about an age, it's about optional time. Time you don't have to sell later. Second, consistency matters more than precision. Waiting for perfect conditions costs more than imperfect action. Markets don't reward certainty, they reward exposure over time. That doesn't mean speculation, it means boring systems that survive bad years. Automation beats intention. Structure beats motivation. Third, retirement is no longer a single event, it's a transition. Income in your 50s and 60s doesn't need to look like income in your 30s and 40s. Planning for phased work, skill-based income, or project roles isn't failure, it's adaptation. Fourth, housing and healthcare can't be background assumptions anymore. They're first-order decisions. Flexibility here often matters more than chasing extra return elsewhere. And finally, the hardest truth. There is no universal fix. Millennials don't need perfect plans, they need resilient ones. Plans that assume volatility, plans that adjust expectations early instead of late. Plans that treat retirement not as an age, but as leverage. The real risk isn't that the timeline broke, the real risk is continuing to plan as if it hasn't. Because once expectations update, decisions improve. And once decisions improve, outcomes follow, even inside a system that no longer plays fair. The future is not guaranteed, but it is negotiable. And that negotiation doesn't start at retirement, it starts now.